So this is the agenda for today's session, folks. You can see it's reasonably comprehensive. And again, obviously, the title for the session is Developing a Good E-commerce Website for Your Business. So I wanted to cover off, if you like, as much as I possibly could under the circumstances. So again, I'm not going to go through that. We'll go through it piece by piece as we move through the session. Again, for anyone who's just joined, what I'm planning to do is hang on at the end of the session to answer any questions that you might have, again, just so that we cover the ground in the 2 hours. So I'll hang on at the end of the session and answer any specific questions that anyone might have. My name is Niall Devitt. As I say, I'm working in digital probably 20 years or thereabouts at this stage. And I work for a company called Content Plan. So I suppose you would describe us as a kind of a boutique digital agency stroke digital consultancy. So we kind of work in two areas, I suppose, broadly speaking. One would be the planning and preparation piece, which obviously training would fall under, and the other then would be the management and the execution piece. And I suppose we like to keep our fingers in both pies, so to speak, because certainly while the theory of this stuff is great for sure, it's really in the practical application. That's really where most of the learning takes place. So again, from our point of view, it's good that we operate in, if you like, in both of those worlds. As you can see, we work with a kind of a broad range of organizations and companies, from quite large companies and organizations right down to smaller businesses and startups across private and public sector. And we've also worked with a number of educational institutes, colleges, etc., etc. I'm going to be giving you guys three supporting documents. I won't really have the time to go into these, but what I would describe these are, they're kind of your digital planning fundamentals or foundational pieces. So one is a marketing plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be exclusively a digital marketing plan. It's a marketing plan. The second one is your buyer personas. That relates to customer segmentation, which is important in terms of the online space. And the third one then is a content calendar. So that's a content calendar for your digital content. And I would say together they make up your overall digital strategy. So oftentimes when I go into a client and they're not getting, I suppose, what they want from their digital marketing efforts, more often than not, 9 times out of 10, it's because they don't have some of the foundational stuff in place. And again, the analogy here is the house. If you don't put the foundations in place, the house is going to fall down. Digital isn't dissimilar. You need to put the foundations in place in the first instance. So if you like, these documents, these templates will allow you to do that. So again, I'll share them during the course and afterwards. I'm going to check into the chat here. Okay. So someone's just saying my sound isn't great there, folks. I'm having a little bit of issue with air at the moment. So just in terms of the bandwidth here, what I might just ask people to do while I deliver the session is if you could shut down your video, please. That'll help, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, so we'll also have a poll at the end of the session, folks, and I encourage you to take that poll. It'll only take a couple of seconds. So I'll launch that at the end of the session, and if you wouldn't mind taking that, that would be great, please. So I always like to introduce my sessions by this, to say that there's no real thing, there's no such thing really anymore as digital strategy. It's just only really strategy in a digital world. And what I mean by that is, digital is having such an impact on our lives, and obviously that, if you like, has been accelerated as a result of the coronavirus and everything that goes along with that. So really, when we think about digital, while it can be useful to think in terms of digital strategy, digital marketing, e-commerce, all of that type of stuff, really now digital impacts our lives to such an extent, that there's really no such thing as digital strategy from the point of view of a business anymore. There's only really strategy in a digital world. And again, just to kind of re-emphasize those points, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these stats here, but just a couple to kind of draw your attention to. So the average internet user now spends 6 hours and 43 minutes online each day, and that's the average internet users. When you consider that, certainly from my point of view, a good night's sleep is probably 6, 7, 8 hours if I'm very, very lucky. That's quite a staggering number. And the majority of internet search traffic now comes from on mobile devices. So in other words, the majority of search traffic is on mobile devices, and the majority of search traffic in 2020 has actually come through video content as well. So again, and all of these trends are kind of increasing kind of year on year, month on month, day on day. Again, just in terms of, and I suppose, obviously I operate in terms of marketing, but I suppose one of the key differences, or the fundamental difference between, if you like, traditional marketing channels and digital marketing channels, is that the marketing has become a two-way street. It's become a two-way conversation. So in essence, that's really been the impact of the internet on marketing. So whereas in a traditional channel, it's more of a mass marketing type of approach, whereas on your Facebooks and the likes, it's much more a two-way street. And again, something that you'll see in terms of the best in terms of their digital marketing, they really utilize that to their best extent. So in essence, they collaborate, they work with their customers nowadays, and really it's their customers that are their sales and marketers, because whether it's booking a restaurant or a hotel or anything like that, nowadays we don't really believe what the business says about itself anymore, what the brand says about itself. We believe what the customers say about the particular business. So we go looking for reviews, etc., etc., etc. And again, you can be proactive in terms of how you might use that in terms of your business. Brand advocates then, and again, this is just by a reminder in terms, so they say that each brand advocate, so again, you could also describe this as kind of digital word of mouth, brings in on average 3 new customers. So if you like, this is a kind of an extension of that same point. And again, if you look at this here in terms of repeat customers, it costs 3 times as much to attract a new customer as it does to get an existing customer to buy again. It takes at least 30 times more marketing investment to attract a new customer than it does to have satisfied customers find new customers for you. And if you look at the last point there, it would suggest that many businesses, at least in this respect, are kind of missing a trick, because most businesses spend 5% of their marketing budgets and efforts on existing customers and 95% trying to attract new customers. Now, if you consider the slide just before, that each brand advocate brings you in on average 3 new customers, and if you consider these points here, you can see that that's a very inefficient and a very ineffective strategy. So ironically, if you were to focus your efforts in terms of working with your existing customers, and as I say, help to turn them into your brand advocates, that would in turn actually work as a much more efficient and cost-effective strategy in terms of new customers as well. And it lends itself in terms of the digital arena. Unique value proposition, again, just by way of a reminder. So again, this is pretty important when it comes to your website, when it comes to your digital marketing. So what is your unique value proposition, or also called your unique selling proposition? Well, it's a differentiator, and it creates a strong foundation for your marketing messages. So if you look on the right hand side in terms of that graphic there, you can see where it sits. So you have what your customers needs and cares about, you have what you do really well as a business, and you have what your competition does really well. And your unique value proposition there sits between what your customer needs and cares about, what you do really well, and what your competition doesn't do so well. So in other words, it's a differentiator. In other words, it explains, or it describes to your prospects why they should become your customers ahead of your competition, right? And again, just in terms of practical terms, where does a unique value proposition sit from a digital point of view? Well, it would sit on the homepage of your website, for instance. So when someone clicks onto the homepage of your website, your unique value proposition or unique selling proposition would sit there, and it would describe quickly and succinctly why it is that they should do business with you, why it is that they should consider becoming your customer, what it is that makes you different ahead of your competitions. And again, certainly when it comes to small businesses, startup businesses, or SME businesses, sometimes this is not something that they've given a lot of thought to. And oftentimes, if you ask them to describe what they say, is they'll tell you what they do. They'll start to describe the features, of their products and services and so on and so forth. But in fact, it's not that. So again, for many people, I'm sure this is something that you've given some thought to, and you understand what it is, and you could describe it quite well. But if you haven't, what I would say is, just by way of a kind of a take-home piece, spend some time to see if you can describe your unique value proposition. And typically, it's 2 to 3 lines, as I said, to describe what makes you different versus your competition, and then have a think about how you might communicate that via your website. So as I mentioned, one place that it would go, or one place that it would be on the homepage of your website. It doesn't necessarily have to be text. It could be communicated, in other ways, through graphics, through video, stuff like that. Customer segmentation, again and again, this is just by way of a reminder before we start. So market segmentation is the process of dividing a market of potential customers into groups or segments based on different characteristics. So the purpose of segmentation is that you're able to introduce a more tailored message that will be received successfully. So why segment? So focus for marketing strategies and positioning, evaluate opportunities and competitor positions, identify and allocate your resources, fine-tune your marketing programs. And I suppose the bottom one there is the most important one. It allows you to personalize your marketing messaging. It allows you to make sure that your messaging is more relevant to whoever it is that you're wanting to target. And I suppose another key difference between digital channels versus traditional channels is the level of targeting that they offer you. So as a, for instance, Facebook on average stores 100,000 data points on the average Facebook user. I'm not suggesting that that's all good. It certainly isn't, but it means that they have an incredible profile of the Facebook user. So you as a marketer, you as an advertiser can tap into that profile, can tap into that targeting, but you really need to know who it is that you're looking to speak to. And the first step in terms of achieving that is to segment your customer base, to segment your audience into segments. Again, in terms of email marketing nowadays, it's all about segmentation. And again, that's a process. It doesn't necessarily happen all in one. This is an extension of segmentation then, and these are called buyer or customer personas, and these are semi-fictional representations of your ideal customer. So in other words, you take your particular customer segments and then you create a fictional character, a fictional representation of the segment. So these are very useful with all of your marketing activities, but especially with your digital marketing. And you can see a kind of a simple example of a customer or a buyer persona there on the right hand side. As I say, I'm going to share a template document with you guys in terms of creating your buyer personas, but I certainly would encourage you to do that, because certainly when it comes down, when you have to market to a buyer persona, an individual ahead of a segment, it helps to humanize your marketing, your communications, and you tend to sell benefits over features. Left to our own devices, we'll often default to selling features, which isn't anywhere near as effective as selling benefits. So again, by way of a piece of homework here, and again, you can use the template that I provided you with if this is not something that you've looked at already. And again, this will have a direct impact in terms of how you potentially structure your website or your e-commerce website. So start to describe maybe 3 to 5 customer segments for your particular business. And again, you'll have an idea as to what these segments might be. And again, this is often dependent on the particular business, so there's no right or wrong answer here. It very much depends on the business and who you're trying to target. So what is digital marketing? And again, just a kind of a reminder here in terms of what digital marketing is. So there's 2 kind of, I suppose, definitions of digital marketing. The second one there is from a colleague of mine called Greg Fry, and I kind of like it because I think it kind of hits the nail on the head in terms of the description there. I've also highlighted some of the words there, again, just by way of understanding. So digital marketing, he says, is about engaging with. So engaging with, key word there. Again, it relates to that earlier slide. It's a 2-way process and building relationships. So it's about building relationships. So if you look at your website, or if you look at any of your digital content, ultimately what digital content is the fuel, right, that drives your digital marketing efforts. It builds relationships with prospects. It builds on relationships with prospects and helps to turn them into your customers. With prospects and customers through marketing communications, content, and online advertising. Online advertising is another key word there. So nowadays, right, even if you're a small business and your digital marketing, you're probably going to need to spend some money on online advertising to get a return on investment, and using the digital devices that consumers currently use. So where it's at nowadays in terms of digital devices is the mobile phone. So in other words, the vast majority of your prospects, the vast majority of your customers will consume your content, will visit your website, will experience your website on a mobile device, will buy your products on a mobile device. And oftentimes it's digital marketers, or indeed as business owners, we create or we design content on a laptop, or indeed a PC. Very simple check that you can do is just get on your mobile phone and consume or engage or experience that content from the point of view of your prospects and customers, and you'd be surprised at what you would pick up in that simple test. Again, some of the main differences here. So it's increasing, it's engaging, which we mentioned, it's data driven. So again, you don't really need to know the answer. So you can go to your Google Analytics, for instance, with respect to your website, and you can see how your website is performing in black and white terms. The data doesn't lie. It will tell you where your website is succeeding. It will tell you where your website is failing. So in other words, that will tell you what you need to do better at, that will tell you where you need to improve. Targeted, as I mentioned, conversion or action driven. So if you look at something like Google Ads, for instance, you will only pay when someone visits your website. You're not necessarily paying for just the ad to be shown. It's typically less expensive than traditional channels. It's testable in the sense that you can run A/B tests, so you can test different elements of what you do. So for instance, you may want to offer customers free shipping, or you may want to offer them a 10% discount. And the cost to the business could be very similar or the same, but the impact in terms of the customers could be very different. So again, as I say, both of those could have a similar cost, but they could have a very different result in terms of the business. And it's permission rather than interruption based. So what I mean by that is, you're watching your favorite TV program, you're served with ads during the break, you've no real choice in terms of that or not. Whereas if you're served with an ad on Facebook or YouTube or something like that, you can shut the ad down if you don't want to watch it. So types of digital marketing then, and there are many. But again, they all work in conjunction with each other. So I suppose what I always say to businesses in terms of what are the right channels, what are the right technologies for you, what are the right content types for you, well, really the answer to that lies with your customers. So what channels are your customers on? What types of content are your customers consuming? What are your customers' preferences? And if you don't know the answer to that, go speak to your customers. And they will tell you. And you don't necessarily need to do that in a very sophisticated way. Of course, you can through the use of customer surveys, et cetera, but you can do it in a very simple way as well. So if I was designing a website on behalf of, say, a client, one of the first things I would do is pick up the phone and ring some of their customers, or in non-coronavirus times, I would sit down and have a coffee with them. And again, it's to get those customers involved in the web design, web development process as early as you can, because they're your greatest experts in terms of your business. Digital ad spending, so you can see it's kind of increasing year on year. And there's no reason to believe that this trend won't keep increasing. So in other words, digital channels or digital advertising, digital marketing is easing, if you like, the traditional marketing kind of breakfast in that respect. Content calendar. So again, and I'm sure people will have experienced this. I mean, one of the greatest, I suppose, enemies in terms of is it's very easy to waste your time on digital. So you have to be strategic, you have to be planned in terms of everything that you do. So you need to plan your digital content ahead of time. And again, I'm going to provide you guys with a simple template in terms of doing that. It's a content calendar. So, all businesses will have seasonality attached to them. So, Christmas might be commercially very viable time. You might have other key dates during the year. So again, you're going to want to plan for that seasonality. You're going to want to plan for those key dates, and a content calendar allows you to do that. Again, Amplify, using audience targeting and ads. So again, if you look at Facebook, organic reach has decreased to such an extent on Facebook that now really Facebook is a pay-for-play platform. In other words, you're not really going to get a return on your investment from Facebook unless you're spending some money on Facebook ads. So typically what you want to do is you want to create good content that is relevant to a particular audience, and then you want to amplify or promote that content to that specific audience, and that's how you're going to be effective on there. Think mobile, as I mentioned. So again, if you're not aware of this, so obviously something like Instagram, for instance, is 100% mobile, but even with Facebook or indeed any of the other digital channels, Facebook is 96%, so it's effectively a mobile platform. As I say, in terms of the majority of people, it's running about 60% globally that will visit your website. They will do so on a mobile device. The majority of e-commerce transactions that take place on a mobile device. So really mobile is where it's at, and that trend is going to continue to increase. Think video. So again, kind of key stat there is the big one in gray there. And again, it's different in terms of where you look, but what they estimate that in 2020, somewhere between 78 and 80% of all internet search traffic is now coming via video. So video is really where it's at in terms of the internet. So if you're not doing video marketing in terms of your business, really it's something that you need to consider and take a look at. Another stat there on the left-hand side, 64% of consumers are more likely to buy a product after watching a video about it. So in other words, if you have an e-commerce store, if you have an online shop and you place your imagery with videos of your products, you're likely to see a boost in terms of your sales or your conversions very, very quickly. Now, again, depending on your product catalog, if you have 1,000 products or something, you may not necessarily be able to do that across your 1,000 products, but maybe pick your 10 or your 20 or your 50 best sellers and kind of start there and see what impact it has in terms of your business. Google My Business. And again, just a reminder here in terms of this, because not all local businesses or SME businesses in particular have a Google My Business account, and it's a free account from Google. And certainly in terms of your local search engine optimization, being found locally, it's a very, very important tool to have. So Google My Business is Google's way of verifying your business and its actual physical address. It helps you to manage your online presence across Google's various tools, including search, maps and reviews. So it's very important for local search engine optimization, and you should take your Google reviews seriously. So again, what I'd recommend, if you don't have a Google My Business, go to Google My Business, search for your business name. Your location should appear as seen in the lower image there, and if not, you'd be prompted to set up a new page. So you follow the steps as they appear. Now, one kind of call out in terms of Google My Business there is you need to have the physical address, because Google will ask you to verify that physical address. So they send you out a postcard and you need to verify your physical address by use of that postcard. It typically takes between kind of 14 and 20 days. But again, if you don't have a Google My Business, I would encourage you to set a Google My Business up. If you have a Google My Business, I would encourage you to use that Google My Business and encourage your customers to leave reviews for your business on there, and obviously acknowledge and respond to those reviews. So selling online then. So nowadays it's relatively easy and cheap to sell products online. So you can sell on Amazon, or you can create a Shopify or indeed a WordPress or WooCommerce store. Two, then you drive traffic to that store from the likes of Google, Facebook, Instagram, etc., and use online advertising from the likes of Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, or retargeting. Retargeting is just a process of remarketing to people who've already visited your website. So in other words, they may have been on your website, looked at 2 or 3 products, added those products to the cart, and for one reason or another didn't buy. You can retarget to those people on the likes of Facebook by just installing what's called the Facebook pixel to your website. But again, in broad strokes, it's relatively easy and it's relatively cost effective to do. Okay, so again, I just wanted to look, because I didn't necessarily want to give you guys a kind of national businesses or even international businesses. So I wanted to have a look at maybe 3 Donegal businesses who are kind of doing it well, or certainly doing it well from what I can see. So here's one example here. This is called batch.ie. You guys may be familiar with it. So I'd encourage you to go and have a look at their kind of website on your own time, and how they how they manage their e-commerce function and their online shop and so on and so forth. It's definitely one worth having a look at. I think they do a pretty good job. There's another business here that you guys, I'm sure, will potentially be familiar with. So again, another Donegal business, I would say doing very well in terms of their website, doing very well in terms of e-commerce. They're well worth having a look at in your own time. And here's another example, pharmacy, inishpharmacy.com. So again, another example to my mind of a Donegal business doing e-commerce and doing an online shop very, very well. So these are 3 businesses that I'd encourage you to go have a look at in your own time. And certainly if you have a look at them, I'm sure there's things that you can learn. There's insights to be had as to why they're successful. So Google search then. So this is kind of, so nowadays, or certainly for Google will send the vast majority of traffic and ultimately create the vast majority of customers for your website. So when you create an e-commerce store or when you create an online shop, you need to understand how Google works, because Google is going to be very important. So here's how it works. Google starts with over 60 trillion individual pages, and it's constantly growing. So it's an absolute massive amount of information. So Google navigates the web by what's called crawling. Sorry. So again, you don't necessarily need to get too worried about the lingo here, but it sends out what's called a search engine spider, which is basically a piece of technology or an AI, and that crawls the internet. It builds an index of the words that it finds and their location. So when a user searches Google, they're in fact searching that index. So the search engine presents the most relevant results of the search from the index. And Google actually uses 200 factors in deciding, if you like, what content to show and where to show that content. And it's a kind of a closely guarded secret, but because of analysis and because of kind of scientific stuff that's been done, we can make very educated guesstimates in terms of how that works. And for the average business, you don't necessarily need to be aware of all of the 200 factors. You need to be kind of aware of the main ones, as it were. So 6 factors Google takes into consideration in every search. So the search term used, in other words, what did the user type into Google when they carried out the search? The location of the person searching. So in other words, if I'm in Donegal and I search for hairdressers, I'm going to get a particular set of search results. Whereas if I'm in Galway and I search for hairdressers, I'm going to get an altogether set of search results. So what we can say is that all search now is local search. It is dependent upon where the person is searching from. The location used in the search completed. So in other words, that would be the situation. I'm from Donegal, I'm holidaying in Galway, and in that context, I would put into the search bar, hairdressers in Donegal or hairdressers Donegal. And obviously in that situation, Google would estimate that even though I'm based in Galway, I'm looking for hairdressers in Donegal. So it would deliver for me a similar set of search results as if I had carried out the search for hairdressers and I was based in Donegal. Are they logged in? In other words, do they have a Gmail, a Google account? And if they have a Google account, Google has more information. It has a better profile of the individual. What is their search history? So how have they interacted with search in the past? So in other words, say that, I gravitate towards video content over text-based content, well, then I will be showing more video content than text-based content. So nowadays, what we can say is not only is all search local search, all search is individualized search. So even if 2 individuals put in exactly the same terminology or exactly the same words into Google from exactly the same location, they will get a slightly different set of search results based on, if you like, the profile that Google has on them and their personal history with search. And another one here is, are they using a mobile device? So as I mentioned earlier on, the majority of search traffic now comes via mobile device. And you can actually talk in terms of Google that there's almost 2 search engines now. There's one for people who are using a mobile device, which is the main search engine. And then there's a secondary search engine for people who are not using a mobile device. But what that basically means is if your website is mobile friendly, if it's optimized, if it operates well in terms of mobile, and your competitor's website doesn't, your competitor's website won't be shown to someone who's searching on a mobile device. So Google started to penalize non-mobile sites back in 2015, I think it was. So how Google ranks your website then? So here are some of the factors that it takes into account. So your domain, which is basically your URL, your website address, your site and your page quality. So in other words, how valuable is your site, or how valuable do people find your site? Your website's freshness. So there's 2 types of websites. There's what are called static websites, so your typical brochure type website. And then there are dynamic websites. Dynamic websites are living, breathing websites. So in other words, I go and visit the website today, and then I go and visit the website in 2 weeks' time. There's new information on the website. The website has changed. And Google favors dynamic websites over static websites. So the more dynamic your website is, the better you're going to do in terms of Google. So for instance, a simple tool to create a dynamic website over a static website would be a blog, for instance. Is it safe? So again, depending on I suppose, the type of website that it is. Obviously, if it's an e-commerce website, the requirements are a little bit greater. But again, your website needs to be safe in terms of what, from the user's point of view. User context, history, location, etc., which we just looked at. And then there's what's called search engine optimization. So search engine optimization is basically the process of getting Google to rank your website higher. And broadly speaking, that's divided into two areas. So you have what's called on-page search engine optimization. That's what happens within your website, and to the great extent you control that. And then you have what's called off-page search engine optimization, and that happens off of your website, and to a much lesser extent obviously you control that, but you can be influential or you can impact that. You also have multi-regional and multilingual. So basically what that means is, say that you were interested in exporting or selling your product into the UK as a for instance, well then it might be wise, or it might be sensible to have a .co.uk version of your website. Say that you were interested in selling your product into France, for instance, it might be sensible to have a .fr version of your website and a French language version of your website. So obviously in the situation with France there, if you had a .fr and a French language version of your website, that's going to rank much better in France than a .ie and an English version of your website. So as I say, they use over 200 factors. So this is kind of a breakdown in terms of those factors, and we won't go into this in huge detail, but again, it's just to kind of make you aware. So this is and Google is constantly tweaking, if you like, those factors or the algorithm in terms of how this works. So we start here on the left-hand side. So if you look here, and these are in terms of the weightings here, so 10 to 13% off-site local. So that's basically having a Google My Business and having reviews with respect to that Google My Business. So certainly from a local search engine optimization point of view there, you can see how valuable or how necessary having a Google My Business is, and certainly having a Google My Business with reviews. So if you're a local business, and you're interested in local customers, you can't afford not to have a Google My Business. Now, what I would recommend is that any business should have a Google My Business and should take it seriously. But again, I've often had clients and they might have, 2 or 3 competitors in a particular area or and maybe only one of those competitors have a Google My Business. The second one there is offsite social. So that's social metrics. So in other words, what that means is, people coming onto your website, sharing your content, tweeting your content, commenting on your content, etc., etc., etc. 18 to 21%. So this is a significant weighting here in terms of your website. So this is links. So in other words, this is other websites that are linking to your website. And if another website links to your website, it sends a signal to Google to say that your website is valuable. Now, what you want to do is you want to get links from what are called high authority sites. So in other words, if the Irish Times or the Irish Independent or the journal.ie, or perhaps there's an online trade journal in your particular industry or something like that, you would want to get links from those businesses. So in other words, the authority or the value of the site linking is a major contributor there. But you can see the weighting in terms of that is significant, and you can be proactive in terms of that. So you could go to the journal.ie, you could say, and you could offer to write an article for them, share your expertise, share your thought leadership, in exchange for a link back to your site. Or alternatively, you could go to, a trade journal in your area or something like that. Just at the bottom there, you can see 20 to 23% engagement. So that's basically how your website performs when people visit your website. So Google is tracking that, so how long do people spend on your website? How many pages did they visit? What's the bounce rate? A bounce rate is basically where someone comes onto your website and leaves very, very quickly. What you see with non-mobile responsive sites is that bounce rate can be anything between 75 and 80%. In other words, people just don't hang around and they leave very quickly. But the better that your site is actively performing with people, right, Google will send more people to it. So if you can improve, say, all your Google Analytics metrics, well, then your site is going to be shown to more people. On the top right here, you see infrastructure. This basically is to do with your website performance, right? So mobile first, which we've talked about, security, page loading times. So nowadays, the kind of golden rule, or the rule of thumb in terms of loading times, is about 2.5 seconds on a mobile device. Now, again, that's not always that easy for an SME website, but it gives you kind of a guideline in terms of where you need to get to. And obviously there's a trade-off there in terms of design. So stuff like video, images, all of that type of stuff, you know, it takes longer to load. So there's a balancing, if you like, between load times and performance and features and functionality. Offsite technical is to do with keywords and keywords usage and SEO stuff there. So we look at that in a little bit more detail. And on 18 to 21% there is on-site content. So again, that's the kind of, if you like, the technical breakdown of it. But what I always say to people is Google's algorithm is so sophisticated nowadays that you can't really gamify it. And in actual fact, creating a website that is valuable for people, customers, is actually more or less the same thing as creating a website that is valuable for Google. They're in essence the same thing. So that's kind of where you need to focus your efforts. So your website's content is the principal influence in its overall ranking and authority. The richness and quality of your content not only decides your website rank, but it also determines how your visitors interact with it. So content can take many forms and types, but regardless of its kind, it must be of high quality. In other words, it must provide a unique take on the subject and offer something of value to the reader or the viewer. Your design then includes features such as images, content organization, and navigation. So website design is vital because it impacts on how your visitors experience what you offer. Your website must be designed so it provides easy access to search engine crawlers for quick indexing, while also adding to the comfort and ease of use for visitors. So keywords then. So in terms of search engine optimization or having your website appear up the rankings in Google, keywords and how to use keywords is, if you like, the first step in understanding how to do that. So to establish your search engine optimization strategy, you must understand how to use keywords. And basically what we're talking about here is your customers will be searching for your products and services in particular ways. They will be using particular words, phrases, etc., etc. And you've got to ensure that language is the language that is used to describe your products and services on your website. So in other words, when it comes to being found by customers online, it's the customer's language, it's the customer's phraseology, it's the customer's terminology that is important, not the businesses. You know, we all tend to have a professional speak, you know, and stuff like that. So again, you can research this. So there are tools that you can use to research how your customers or your prospective customers, you know, are searching for your products and services. And it makes a lot of sense for you to do that and to do that on an ongoing basis. So intelligent placement of your targeted keywords is the first step in attracting visitors who are searching for your content. So short tail keywords are broad search terms involving 2 or 3 words. Now, again, you can look to your own user experience in terms of Google to kind of realize this. So when you go to Google typically and you input 2 or 3 words, you're at the start of your finding out. Say that you're looking to buy a product, you're researching that product, or you're trying to find out about that product. Whereas if you're at the end of your buying journey online, you will use typically what are called long tail keywords, or if you like, more words you will input into Google. So long tail keywords, on the other hand, are specific and might extend to a small phrase. They are often less competitive than their short tail counterparts and therefore easier to rank for. So when your website, has your website got the right keywords? So 2 factors to consider. So keyword, a significant word or phrase relevant to the content of your website, right? And search term, the commonly used keywords users type into search engines to find you. So these are some of the tools that you can use to establish your keyword strategy. So there's offline methods, as you can see there, right? And there's online methods. So the Google Ads Keyword Planner is a tool that you get with the Google AdWords suite of products. Now, you don't actually need to run ads to access the tool, and it's the one that I would recommend. But even something like Google Suggest, which is basically where you go to Google and you type into Google, and you see when you put a word into Google, it will start to suggest certain searches for you dependent on the words that you put in there. Where it generates those suggestions or those searches is from popular searches from within Google. So even that in itself can be used to inform your keyword strategy. Where do your keywords need to go? So your keywords need to go in the title, the URL, which is one and the same thing. So in other words, if you're using a platform such as WordPress or indeed Shopify, once you create your title, that automatically creates your URL. Your description or your meta description. So when you go onto Google, you'll see that there's a description just under the title of the page, and you want that to be between 150 and 160 characters, but the key phrase or the keyword needs to go in there as well. Your subheadings, so again, in terms of the internet or how people consume content online, they tend to scan content, so you use subheadings to break up that content, but your keyword also needs to go into one of your subheadings. Somewhere in the body of the text, ideally the first paragraph. If you're using images, your keyword needs to go into the title, the description, and what's called the alt text. So basically, alt text is for people who are, blind or don't have very good eyesight, and on their machines, they have an audio device that basically describes the image using the alt text, but because of that, it has a strong SEO value. Video, if you're using video, so title, description, and tags. Again, tags in terms of video are strong in terms of SEO, and any linking that you might do internally or externally. Now, again, what I could say from having worked certainly in terms of the kind of SEO side of things, if you're doing SEO and doing it relatively well, certainly if you're an SME business, you're probably already ahead of about 80 to 85% of your competition, because in fact, not that many SME businesses I find in an Irish context are, number one, aware of SEO, and even if they are aware of SEO, are doing SEO in a strategic, consistent basis. So again, I just wanted to give you guys a tool, because I'm sure that you have an existing website, and sometimes it can be difficult, to analyze that website. So I wanted to give you kind of a quick tool to create a quick, if you like, get quick feedback or do a quick review of your website. And this is a useful tool if you're working with a web designer or a web developer, because it will generate feedback and insight for you that you can share with that web designer, web developer, and you can make improvements to your website pretty quickly. So this is a tool from a company called Hubspot, called the Hubspot website grader. So I'm going to just take you in for a look here. Hopefully this will work. Okay. Oh. So just checking in with you folks there. You can see my screen, yeah? Just checking in, folks.
Yeah. Yes, can see it. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So I'm typing Hubspot website grader into Google here. Click, so it comes up here first. So I'm going to just click on that there. So you can see here, I can put it in, and it doesn't have to be my website. It could be a competitor's website. You know what I mean? It can be any website. So what I'm going to use here is because I know that they're pretty savvy in terms of their digital. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Happy Pair guys from Wicklow. They're going to do health, foods, and all of that type of stuff. Now you need to input your email as well to this, because it generates a report. So I'm going to have to do that as well. You see there's a button here, and I'm going to press on this button, and it says get your score. So it'll take a second. Okay, so you can see it's just generated this score here. So you can see it marks the website across 4 separate areas, and it marks the website out of a total of 92. Now, the one thing I would just say about this is, you probably need to run the test a few times, because you can get, an anomaly on a given day. So I wouldn't take one score as gospel. I would run it a couple of times just in case something like that. So you can see it marks the website across 4 areas here. So performance, which basically is in terms of speed here, search engine optimization, this mobile rank or mobile score here is in relation to mobile friendliness, and then it also scores the website in terms of security. So it gives you a quick feedback in terms of the website. So if I scroll down here, so if I look at the performance score, for instance, it's given the Happy Pair website 22 out of 30. Now, typically, certainly in terms of performance, some of these changes will be easier and more cost effective to make, and then some of them will be be slightly, more challenging. So again, you've got to prioritize, I suppose, in terms of doing that. So you would prioritize those changes that in essence are easy or cost effective. So if I look at this here, what I can see here is image size. So images can take a long time. So basically what this is telling me here is that the images on the Happy Pair website are not optimized for mobile. Now, there's a couple of likely reasons for that. It may be that they're using a free template. I don't know what the website is designed on, but they're using a free template. And because they're using a free template, it doesn't optimize the images. So again, something just by way of a kind of a tip, if you're creating a business website on whatever platform, if it was WordPress or Ecommerce or Wix or whatever the case may be, I would always encourage businesses to go for a paid for template over a free template, even though that will save you some money at the start. But the reason I would recommend that is free templates are not maintained by the developer or the designer of that template. So in other words, they'll come back to bite you, whereas templates that you pay for are maintained. So I'd always encourage, if you're building a business website, you go for a paid for template over a free template. But basically, you could fix this relatively easy. So you could zip those particular images and then upload the zipped images. In other words, they would take up less space and they would load more quickly. So if I scroll down here, and again, they're getting a pretty good score, and they've improved it, because I've checked in a couple of times that they've actually improved it in the last. So you can see here in terms of the feedback here. So you could share this with your web developer or web designer. It can be emailed to you as part of a report, and you could say, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to improve this? And obviously it gives you, it gives you a tool that you can use when you're working with a developer or working with a web designer. Okay, and you can see it's pretty easy to use there. So what I would like you to do, folks, let me share my screen again, because you'll be able to do this pretty quickly. Not going to take you too long. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to use Website Grader to do a quick review of your own website. Now, I'm not going to ask you to share your score, because I'm obviously conscious of the fact that's confidential and relates to your business. But again, it's just to do the exercise here. And again, have a look at where potentially you need to improve your website. If you currently don't have a website, look at a competitor website, for instance, or indeed look at a local business that you're a customer of or you're familiar with, or something like that. So pick another business or another business website that you're familiar with. So before we do that exercise, because I give you maybe 5 or 10 minutes to do that exercise, folks, can I just check in with people? Are you clear? Anyone unclear in terms of what I'm asking you to do there? Is there anyone? I just want to show you guys, because I meant to actually show you this during the SEO section and I forgot, but I just want to show it to you. So if you just bear with me here, I'm just going to show you something else here. Now, I'm sure people may be familiar or may have used Google Ads, but again, if you're not, just to show you this too. So again, you do need to have a Google Ads account. You don't necessarily need to run Google Ads, but you will need to input your credit card details to create a Google Ads account, and they do try to push you into running ads, so just be a little bit mindful of that. But I have a Google Ads account here, provided I can remember my password, and I think I have it automatically stored, hopefully. So I'm just going to sign into Google Ads here. I just want to show you the keyword planning tool. So I'm in Google Ads here, and you can see here in the top right-hand corner, there's a Tools and Settings button. So I'm going to click on the Tools and Settings button, and it'll open this for me here. So over here under Planning, you see there's Keyword Planner. So I'm going to click on Keyword Planner, and you can see here there's 2 additional options that I'm being served with. So it says Discover New Keywords or Get Search Volumes and Forecast. So I'm going to click on Discover New Keywords. And you can see I have 2 additional options here. So I could start with keywords. So in other words, if I had an idea as to what search terms my customers were using, I could start there and I could input that. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm going to start with a website, because again, that's a good place to start. Everything just to mention here in terms of my default settings. So my default settings here are English, as in the English language, and Ireland. So I'm looking at search volumes within Ireland, but by the same token, I could change that to the UK, for instance, if I was interested in the UK, or I could change that to a county within Ireland if I was interested in a county within Ireland. So I can change that if I wanted to change that. So I'm going to start with a website here. So it allows me to put in a website. So again, I'm going to use the Happy Pair guys, again, just for continuity. Where did I have? Yeah, okay. So I put their website URL or website address in there, and I click on Get Results. And it'll take a second. Okay, so you can see here that the Google Keyword Planner has generated 653 keyword ideas, and I could download, if you see here on the right, I could download these keyword ideas as an Excel or a CSV if I wanted to. Right, so let's just scroll down in terms of, just need to move you guys. So if I scroll down here, I can see, so you can see here, I don't know how relevant this would be at the moment. So the first one here, it says 2020 vegan cookbook. And what it's telling me is that the average number of monthly searches in Ireland for this search term are between 10 and 100. Competition is high. In other words, it's a little bit more difficult to rank for. If I scroll down, let's see if I can find something. Get something with more volume. Okay, so plant-based diet. Right. Again, I don't know how relevant this is in terms of the Happy Pair guys, but again, what it's telling me here is the average number of monthly searches for this particular key term are between 1,000 and 10,000. The competition is high. This information over here comes from Google Ads. So basically what this is telling me is that businesses are paying between 30 cents and 96 cents, right, to rank in Google via Google Ads. So within Google, you'll see there's two types of search listings. So there's paid for listings, which you access via Google Ads, and then there's the organic listings, which obviously you know that's in terms of search engine optimization or appearing there organically. Now, users are relatively savvy in terms of telling the difference between the two. So about 80% of users click on the organic search results, and about 20% of users click on Google Ads. Now, that's not to say that Google Ads isn't a viable option, and obviously it's the only option until such time as you rank organically. So oftentimes businesses or companies will use, if you like, both search engine optimization and what's called search engine marketing or Google Ads in conjunction with each other. So they will be using Google Ads until such time as they rank organically. And you know, ranking certainly at a national level or even an international level can take quite a bit of time. So it can take maybe 18 months, because even though you might go from page, you know, 197 to 75, in real terms, there's very little return on investment for the business. So really, when it comes to Google, the only place to be is on page one. You know, that's where you actually get traffic, you get a return on investments, but it can take quite a bit of time to successfully do that. At a local level, you can rank within 6 months. So again, it's, you know, it's easier to rank locally in Donegal than it would be, say, nationally in Ireland. It's easier to rank in Ireland than it would be, say, in the UK, because obviously the UK is a larger market with more competition. By the same token, it would be easier to rank in the UK than it would be in the US, as a for instance. But again, so what you can do is you can, and again, you know, if I was doing keyword research for a client, I would often spend maybe 2 days, you know, coming up with a list of maybe 200 or 250 keywords that would be relevant to that particular business. And then you would prioritize from within those keywords. Now, typically you're trying to target those longer tail keywords, because again, as I say, when people put more terms in there, typically, you know, they're at the end of the kind of buying journey, whereas if they're you know, put less keywords in there, they're typically at the start of their buying journey. So long tail keywords will typically convert at a higher rate than short tail will. But again, just to introduce you, so certainly in terms of your keyword research, you know, you don't really need to go too much further than the Google keyword tool. Okay, folks, so hopefully you've been able to do that there. So domain name and hosting. So I'm guessing for most people, you know, you've already have your domain name and hosting, but if someone's at the is in a more kind of startup place and possibly doesn't have a website as of yet, or they're about to launch a new business, this is something that you need to give consideration to. So your domain name is your web address. So, the example there, www.mybusiness.ie, and used by search engine people to find your website. So kind of general rules of thumb is, if you're an Irish business with an Irish customer base, go for a .ie. Also purchase the .com and redirect the .com to the .ie. If you're an international business, right, do the reverse. So be a .com, purchase the .ie and redirect the .ie to the .com. If if you're interested in the UK, as I mentioned, it could be a good idea to have a .co.uk version of your website. Again, similarly, if it was France, a .fr, I'm not sure what the domain in terms of some of the other European countries are. Again, if it came to France, for instance, a French language version of your website. So if you're making a website for your business, your domain name should match your company name. So for example, your companyname.com. And again, what I would say is your domain name is so important nowadays. And sometimes what you'll see is someone will come up with a name for their business. They won't do the domain research. They won't see if the domain is available. And then they'll end up coming with, they'll tag on a word to the domain, or they'll do something like that. I go so far, unless there's already a lot of brand value in your name, right, I change your name. Your domain to me is too important. It should reflect your name. So again, as I say, if you're a local Irish business, you should choose a .ie domain, but also purchase the .com and redirect from the .com. So in other words, if someone types your business name .com, they're redirected to the .ie. So websites are stored on special servers, special computers called servers, right? When an internet user wants to view your website, all they need to do is type directly or indirectly your website address into their browser. This action connects them to your server, and your web pages will be delivered for them. Now, this is probably something that your web developer or your web designer will look after you. But one kind of call out in terms of this, where your website is hosted makes a difference in terms of performance. So basically what that means is you want your website to be hosted close to Ireland. Now, I don't think you can have it hosted in Ireland, but I think you can have it hosted in the UK, for instance, because if your website is hosted in, say, North America or Asia or somewhere like that, what's actually having to happen is a signal needs to go to there, right? The pages are loaded and the signal needs to come back. So obviously, the farther away your website is hosted, that has a direct consequence in terms of your website performance. So typically, if you're an Irish website, you want your website hosted close to Ireland. And again, oftentimes changing your hosting, making sure that you're on a more suitable hosting can make a significant difference in terms of your website performance, because often what you see is businesses are trying to save money, but in fact, they've gone with too cheap a hosting package. And then that has a direct consequence in terms of their website performance. But again, it's a conversation that you can have with your web developer or your web designer. So again, just in terms of what are called the accelerator platforms or the e-commerce solutions that are out there. So again, nowadays, typically when you build a business website, unless there's a very specific requirement, you're working off what's called an accelerator platform. In other words, the technology to the large extent is already built, right? And you're rearranging or reconfiguring the technology to create a website on behalf of that business. So this is in terms of the e-commerce market share. So you can see, so the main platform that the majority of business websites, or indeed business e-commerce websites, are built on is what's called WordPress WooCommerce. So WordPress is if you like, the biggest platform out there. WooCommerce is a plugin that's used in conjunction with WordPress to create an e-commerce store. But there are others, the likes of Squarespace, Shopify in terms of B2C. Would be very well known, and there are others. Again, what's the right platform for you? It very much depends on your business, and it depends on your customers. Again, a call out in terms of that, if you're working with a web designer or a web developer, make sure, right, that they're considering the business and the business requirements, and that they're building the website on the right platform for the business. Oftentimes, web designers or web developers will build on the platform that they're familiar with or that they're comfortable with. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right platform for the particular business. So it's always worth, doing a little bit of research there yourself and figuring that out. Okay, I'm just going to check in the chat, folks, because there's chat coming through there.
Niall, have you any rules of thumb on which is the best?
I'm going to go through. So the two main ones, certainly in an Irish context, right, from what I've seen, would be WordPress in terms of e-commerce. Now, would be WordPress, WooCommerce, and Shopify. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the differences between the two, right? And why you should potentially choose one over the other. So I suppose that's as much as I can do. I had a client a good number of years back that their website, to my mind, was built on the wrong platform. Now they're relatively big. They're in the digital space, so they were spending quite a bit of money on their website. It wasn't but the website was up for a redesign or redevelopment. I recommend, actually at this point, I recommended that they move to WordPress at that point, because they were doing a lot of content marketing, which WordPress is good for. They didn't want to do that because the cost was maybe 3,000 or 4,000 in addition to, if you like, the proposal that they had. But about 2 years later, that came back to bite them. So they actually eventually did have to migrate to WordPress, WooCommerce, but at that stage, it cost them in the tens of thousands. So while they saved money up front, it cost them over the long term. So again, it's it's just something to be kind of mindful of.
We built ours on Squarespace.
Go on, yeah.
We built on Squarespace. I just want to. We find it fine. It's delivered on page. I just want to know what you thought of that.
And it's and I'm sure it is, right. I'm sure it is. It's just again, just from experience. I mean, it's always, if you're engaging a web developer or web designer, and they're suggesting Squarespace, or they're suggesting WordPress, or they're suggesting Shopify, or they're suggesting something else, right? I'd always like to hear, why are you suggesting this platform versus another platform? You know what I mean? And the answer to that question shouldn't be, well, because everything I build on WordPress. You know what I mean? Like, the point is, it should be suiting the business rather than suiting the web developer. And I'm just saying that can happen. I'm not suggesting that it happened, it happens often or whatever, but it definitely does happen. Whereas, if you take what we do, our process would always be to establish, relatively speaking, what's the right platform for the business before and again, they're all pretty good. It's just to make sure that it's the right one. So in 2020, anyone can build and design a website without knowing anything about web development. So theoretically, you can, and these platforms are relatively user-friendly with a little bit of learning. So you can do this yourself. And again, I'd encourage people to learn about the platform that their website is built on, even if they're working with a web developer or a web designer. So it pays to be informed in terms of that. So what you need in order to build a website: a domain name, website hosting. So in this case, WordPress, or indeed another accelerator program. So Shopify, for instance. So once you have a domain and hosting, create a WordPress website. WordPress WooCommerce. So this is a plugin. So again, just to give you a little bit of history on WordPress. WordPress was originally set up as a blogging platform. It then became, I suppose, a website platform, and it's latterly become an e-commerce platform, if you like, as the kind of digital world has changed in terms of requirements. And the main plugin, or the most successful plugin that generally is used with WordPress to create e-commerce sites, is a plugin called WooCommerce. So WooCommerce is an open source e-commerce plugin for WordPress. It is designed for small to large sized online merchants using WordPress. Launched in September 2011, the plugin quickly became popular for its simplicity to install and customize. So you can activate the free WooCommerce plugin on a new or existing WordPress site, follow a guided tour, and set up an e-commerce store. So in other words, using the WooCommerce plugin is a lot like using WordPress. It looks very, very similar. So in other words, they kind of work in conjunction with each other. WordPress pricing and features here. So you see the example. So basically, WordPress is very, very cheap or cost effective to get started, and that's one of the reasons why it's as successful as it is. Now, again, in terms of business, it's not the personal. Personal here is kind of for, I suppose, hobby type websites. You're looking at the kind of premium business or e-commerce, but technically you can actually build a website on WordPress for free. You don't actually need to pay them. Now, you do need to have a paid for account to use the WooCommerce plugin. So while you can build a website on WordPress for free, you do need to have a paid for account to use WooCommerce. Shopify then, so you see the cost or the comparison in terms of Shopify here. And again, just one advantage I would say, now Shopify is certainly on the basic product is a B2C platform. So if you're a B2B business, Shopify isn't really a solution for you. So it's a B2C. And Shopify was exclusively created as an e-commerce accelerator platform, right? So it's exclusively created for e-commerce. So in that sense, it has a certain advantage. The other thing that Shopify has, now again, it depends on the business. So if they have an enterprise level product called Shopify Plus, so it allows you to scale up, internationally, right? Effectively and cost effectively. WordPress don't have that. Now, again, unless you're doing very, very serious volumes of sales, that doesn't become an issue. But say that you had a business that had a WooCommerce site and they started to do, huge turnover internationally, well, then they would have to move to some type of enterprise level product, and there will be significant cost to that. So Magento or something like that, but you're talking in the hundreds of thousands. Whereas Shopify allows you to scale up to an enterprise level product, Shopify, but in a much more cost-effective fashion. So these are kind of the differences between the two, and these would be generally the two that we would recommend. That's not to say that the others aren't good. So Shopify is exclusively a web-based e-commerce platform, which includes hosting, whereas WordPress and WooCommerce is an open source plugin for WordPress. Then you need to have a hosted WordPress website to use it. In other words, you need to have a website, WordPress website built before you start. The key, I suppose, one of the key differences, Shopify has set pricing, whereas WordPress has flexible pricing. So in other words, with Shopify, you pay more upfront, whereas with WordPress, you pay as you go, right? So Shopify is good if you want your website live quickly and have limited technical knowledge, whereas WordPress can be a better option for B2B. So in other words, you could definitely say the learning curve with Shopify is less, the learning curve with WordPress, WooCommerce is greater. Shopify, because it was built as a B2C platform, it has better security. So WordPress is a little bit more susceptible to being hacked and all of that type of stuff, right? And this is a key advantage, I suppose, from a Shopify. Shopify has built-in support. So in other words, if you build your website on Shopify, they have 24/7 support, whereas you don't have support with WordPress. Now, if you pay for a purchased team or a template on WordPress, well, obviously you can go back to the developers of that particular team for support. WordPress has better multilingual capabilities. So in other words, if you're looking at, multiple European geographies or jurisdictions, and you have multilingual requirements, generally speaking, WordPress is better for that in the first instance. And WordPress, because it was, if you like, started off as a blog and a content, or sorry, as a website, in general terms, it's got better search engine optimization. Now, again, this is all pretty relative. So broad strokes, what I would say is if you're prepared to pay a little bit more upfront and you're B2C, and you don't want to engage in a steep learning curve, Shopify is better than WordPress. If you don't want to pay as much upfront and you're prepared to, if you like, learn more, well, then WordPress is a better option. So again, it very much depends. DIY versus web designer then. So again, I'm sure most people, but again, you can do it yourself. So I'm not going to go through this in terms of, but again, it's, and again, even if you're working with a web developer or a web designer, I'll always recommend that you familiarize yourself with the platform that they're working on, and particularly the back end of the platform. Ironically enough, when it comes to web design and web development, the focus is always at the front end, what customers see, but the back end is equally, and in some cases more important, but sometimes it can get a little bit overlooked. So stuff like search engine optimization, for instance, you know, and typically when you work with a web developer or a web designer, what you're in fact paying them for is their time, right? So if they're giving you a cheapest chips price, you know, that means that they're having to cut down in terms of the time that they invest in terms of the website. So where is that time being cut down? So again, it's always worth having that conversation. So your website, which pages should you include? So again, and even if you have a website, right, it's worth your time doing this bit of analysis, right? So these are some of the main pages that, if you like, are included on your typical business website. So you obviously have your homepage. So your homepage, to a large extent, if you like, creates the first impression of your business. I mentioned, you know, it's where your unique selling proposition should sit. Your about page, you could also say your about page, your team page. So this is often where people will go to next, particularly when they're not familiar with your business. So, you know, you want to highlight and reference the people behind the business, etc., etc. If you sell services, you want the services page. Sometimes, depending on the requirements in terms of those services, so you might want an overview in terms of your services, and then you may want to link off to individual services that would give, if you like, detailed description of the specific service. Products, same rules kind of apply here. So again, obviously, if you've a large product catalog or something like that, you know, obviously that's a slightly different. Oftentimes with B2C e-commerce websites, they will lead with their shop. So their shop will be their homepage, and there can be an argument for doing that. Frequently asked questions page is one that's often overlooked. And again, I never really understand it, because it's good for the customer and it's good for the business. So I'm sure in terms of your business with customers, you know, there's questions that you answer consistently or very, very regularly. Well, the place for those questions and the place for those answers is on a frequently answered questions page via your website. It saves you time and it saves your customers hassle. Certainly in terms of e-commerce or online sales, testimonials or reviews are absolutely critical. So that's what we call social proof. So obviously, if you're using something like Shopify or Word, you can actually integrate this. So you can, you know, once the product or once it's delivered to the customer, you can invite them to leave a review. But reviews are fundamental in terms of online selling, social proof. So you want to be proactive in terms of doing that. So sometimes you can incentivize that process. You know, if someone leaves a review, you give them a discount in terms of their next purchase, or alternatively, you know, you enter them into maybe a monthly competition, something like that. Contact page. So typically you want to use a contact page versus providing a web address for your website, an email address for your business, because that email address can be scraped and then you can be spammed. So typically you want to create a contact page. Right, a blog, which I've mentioned, allows you to create a dynamic versus a static website. So a blog is something that you will update on a relatively frequent basis. Right, again, general rule of thumb there, I would say, is if you're going to engage with blogging, I would say aim to create at least one new blog post per week, informed by your keyword research and informed by your customer segments or your buyer personas. Privacy policy page, terms and conditions page, sitemaps page is basically, and your web developer or your web designer would do this. It's, if you like, a list of directions to different areas from within your site. And a page not found page is basically where someone goes off your site or goes to a page that no longer exists. So, you know, you've deleted the page and it just takes them back to your website. So again, this is just a kind of quick synopsis in terms of what maybe you should include on your website. But you know, if you're starting a web development or a web design process, and even if you're working with a web developer or designer, it's good to go through and just, you know, work out what are the pages that you need to have on your website, because that will make that process a little bit easier, you know, and certainly when it comes to us working with clients, you know, this is work that we get them to do beforehand. Homepage. So this is the homepage people will see first, and as such, it should tell everyone who you are and what your company does. The content on your homepage should be intriguing enough to capture the attention of your visitors within seconds. So your homepage needs to be well designed, load fast, and look professional. So it includes a short description of who you are, what you do, a brief explanation of your services and products, and how you can help your potential customer or client. About page, people do business with other people and visitors want to learn a bit more about the people who are behind the company. The About page is often one of the most visited pages on any website. This page should give a brief summary of who you are, the company history, and what isolates you from the competition. In other words, what makes you different. So again, you can see that your unique selling proposition or your unique value proposition is reinforced throughout your website. So it should contain a summary of your business and whom it implies, biographies and any pictures of staff, any special achievements, awards, and again, the way that you differ from others who provide the same product or indeed service. Your services page, this is where you list the services that you provide. So a synopsis of the services presented, bullet points of services with short explanations, and links to learn about more specialized services if you desire. So if you consider that from a user experience point of view, particularly you're probably talking about B2B here, you might have one potential prospect who just wants a snapshot. They just want the services in shorthand before they make the decision. And you might have another type of individual that wants to go into more detail. They need more information. So in essence, you should cater for both of those two user experience. I can go to the services page, I can get the snapshot or the shorthand, then I can click through to the detailed explanation if I need that information. So again, the advantages of using your services and how they differ from the services of your competition. Again, differentiation. Products page, again, an outline of the products available with short descriptions of each product, links to products pages that contain more information, and what a customer can expect by purchasing those products and why customers should buy those products from you rather than the competition. Obviously, when it comes to selling products online, your visuals are fundamental. So the disadvantage, obviously if you have a bricks and mortar store, someone walks in, they can see, feel, touch, smell the product. Obviously they can't do that in a digital setting, so it's limited. So obviously your visual content in that context is hugely important and will have a massive impact in terms of your sales. Now I mentioned in terms of videos, so if you can do video around your products, that's going to be better again. But again, obviously it depends on the business. It depends. Frequently asked questions page, which I mentioned. Testimonials, reviews. Again, obviously it depends on the business, but I would say is if you're looking at online sales, social proof reviews, these are very, very important, and you've got to be proactive in terms of how you achieve that. Contact page, which I mentioned, blog. So you can think of your blog as your greatest and most affordable marketing tool. A blog drives traffic and sales and leads. So a survey at Hubspot found that 50% of businesses who blog have generated leads from that. And a blog gives your company advice. It creates a place where you can tell your company story, share your expertise, and engage with customers. In other words, it allows you to communicate the personality of the business. Privacy policy page, again, something you can have a look at. Obviously, GDPR, if you're not familiar with, is something that affects all of us, whether you're a big business or a small business. So it's something that you need to familiarize yourself with. Terms and conditions, again, obviously, if you're e-commerce, so in terms of shipping, what people can expect, etc., etc. So these are all things that you need to have a look at. Site maps I talked about. Okay, so again, by way of an exercise, folks. And again, we'll take 5 minutes out. I'm not necessarily going to ask you to share too much in terms of this because, again, I'm cognizant of the fact that this is in relation to your business and it's confidential and stuff like that. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take 5 or 10 minutes out. I'd like you to go to your existing website. Now, again, if you don't have an existing website, pick another website, as I say, a competitor or indeed a local business or something like that, and just do a quick review in terms of the pages that you have on your website and just see if there are any potentially missing that you should have. So I'm going to give you 5 or 10 minutes to do that exercise. So again, just before we do that exercise, folks, are you okay with what I'm asking you to do there? Is anyone unsure?
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
That's
So
great.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's 5 or 10 minutes to do that exercise, folks, and then we'll come back. Again, as I say, if people have specific questions in relation to their specific website, I'm happy to take those questions at the end of the session, but I'm going to push on just in the interest of time management. So let me give you user experience, and I'm sure you'll have, this is a very fashionable word, I suppose you would say, certainly in terms of that kind of web area. And again, we don't have the time to go into this in massive detail here, but we don't necessarily need to, right? So what is user experience? So user experience in simple terms is the overall experience of a person using a product, such as a website or indeed a computer application, an app, in terms of how easy or pleasing it is to use. And obviously the big companies, the Amazons and the Facebooks of this world, they spend millions, in some cases billions, on understanding user experience. Now, the net effect of that is because we use these platforms so regularly, right, we become preconditioned to expect a type of user experience. And obviously it's, it's easy, relatively speaking, for the likes of Amazon to deliver, a very, very high level of user experience because they have massive resources available to them, right? Whereas it's much more challenging on a local business or an SME business and so on and so forth. Nonetheless, our customers have become used to a certain type of user experience. So they're not prepared to put up with challenges of difficulty in terms of user experience. And so I mentioned in terms of mobile, for instance, if you're, that's an obvious one. But I suppose there's kind of common things that you can look out for. So more often than not, when it comes to user experience, and I see with websites, it's not necessarily to do with the money that they've spent. It's more often than not, and I would put it down to, certainly for SME businesses or SME websites, the people who are not involved in the web development, web design process, to my mind, are the most important group of stakeholders. They're the customers. In other words, websites should be designed for customers. They should be developed for customers. But more often than not, the web design development process has, a web developer or a web development team and, a business owner or someone representing the business. So the people that are not represented in that conversation are the customers. So often you end up with a website that's very business focused as opposed to be customer focused. And again, what I'd encourage you to do is, if you're developing or designing a website, get your customers involved in that process as early as you possibly can. Again, it can be sophisticated, it can be customer survey stuff like that, or it can be very simple. It can be literally having conversations with those same customers in relation to what they want from the website. Now, obviously, sometimes customers will ask you for something that, is not possible in terms of resources and stuff like that. But nonetheless, they'll often give you very, very good insights in terms of business. So I had a client there recently, so they, we did a review with their customers and they found something out. If you like, if they had taken the time to do it, they would have found it out 6 months ago when they were designing their website. So not only did it mean that their website was less effective in the meantime, but they now have an additional cost in terms of fixing what's wrong. Whereas if they'd actually engaged with those customers 6 months ago, they wouldn't be kind of where they are today. So common website user experience mistakes then. So again, the first one there is the general one. So the website tends to be business focused rather than user or customer focused. Hidden value proposition. So certainly you see this in terms of small business or SME websites. So again, the differentiator, the value proposition, unique selling proposition is not clear. It's not well communicated, right? Ignoring mobile, which we mentioned. Difficult to understand navigation. So the rule of thumb is 3 clicks. So in other words, we want the user or we want the customer, the prospect, to be able to do whatever it is that we want them to do, purchase a product within 3 clicks. Now, again, that's not always easy to do. But the point is, you certainly don't want to be going to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 clicks, right? So every additional click that you introduce in terms of that user journey, you will lose people along the way. Overloading users with too much information, right? So the internet is shorthand. Attention spans are short, right? So again, you want to get to the nub of it. You want to get to the point of it quickly. Using extensive or complicated forms. So you often see this. So oftentimes you see someone who's creating an online form and they've just created their offline or their physical form and they've just put it online, right? That's their process. I mean, that's not, so typically, you want to adapt your forms for the online experience. No clear calls to action. So in other words, you get me to consume the digital content. You get me to read the particular web page, but you don't communicate to me what it is that you want me to do next. You don't encourage me to take the next step in becoming your customer. So again, all digital content should have a clear call to action, and you should be able to measure that call to action. And that call to action will then be the indicator as to whether or not that particular piece of digital content is successful or not. Stock imagery. So again, stay away from stock imagery where possible. And certainly for local businesses, you know, there's a huge opportunity here. So you want to have imagery of your people. You want to have imagery of your bricks and mortar premises. You want to have imagery of your street or your location or stuff. And obviously from the point of view of a local business, it's a huge advantage that you have over other businesses. Again, obviously, if you're working with a web designer or a web developer and you don't provide them with imagery, well, obviously, you know, they have no choice but to use stock imagery. But there's nothing worse than seeing stock imagery on a website. So again, avoid stock imagery if at all possible. Too few payment gateways. In other words, too few options in terms of being able to pay. So I had a client there last year, you know, reasonably successful, small business online, great product, fantastic product, right? Wasn't probably getting what he'd hoped to get and couldn't understand that. But so he had two payment gateways. One of those payment gateways, the one he was dependent on, was PayPal, right? Now, the reason he had PayPal there, and there's nothing wrong with PayPal. PayPal is great, but it's typically used by an older generation online. And it was because when he purchases products online, he uses PayPal. So in other words, he hadn't consulted his customers to find out what they use. So again, you know, typically with payment gateways, you want to offer a number of options, and those options are dictated to by your customers. So, you know, if you've customers that are quite young, for instance, you might be looking at something like Google Pay or Apple Pay or something like that. But again, it's dictated to by your customers. Lack of testing and feedback. So when you launch a website, you should have a testing phase. And again, that can be simple, right? It can be a case of giving 5 customers access to that website for a week, asking them to come back with their feedback in terms of that website. But again, not to ignore that testing phase, because again, that will help to ensure that your website is better, and they will pick up things that you won't see, or indeed your web developers or web designers won't see. So again, by way of a piece of homework, you know, review your existing website and see if it's making any of these common user experience mistakes. Right. And again, what I always say, and it can be difficult for the business owner, right? It's a difficult process, you know, but what I always say is try to step into the virtual shoes of your customer, play the part of the customer, experience the website from the point of view of the customer, you know, and again, if you can't ask your customers, ask your friends and family, you know, and again, take the feedback on the chin, you know, because sometimes criticism is difficult to hear, but nonetheless, it can often be very, very valuable. Okay, visual content. So again, I'm going to highlight this in terms of e-commerce, because it's very much where it's at, right? So our brain processes visuals 60,000 times faster than text. So this will kind of tell you the impact that visuals have, and certainly the requirement for visuals when it comes to e-commerce, right? It's absolutely fundamental and important. So content with visuals gets on average 94% more total views, right? So obviously that just gives you an idea. So this is a tool that I'd recommend. Do we have time to show you this? Probably not, I would say. Let's just see what we have left in terms of slides. So this is a tool called canva.com. So it works off of templates. Actually, I'll just show you very quickly. So again, folks, you can see my screen there, yeah?
Yeah.
Just checking, you can see my screen, folks?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a tool called canva.com. And there's a free and a paid for version. Again, I'd encourage you to start on the free version. But if you're like me, and I'm certainly challenged in terms of creativity or anything like that, so it wouldn't be a strength of mine, right? So I find this tool an absolute godsend in terms of, so you can see here, it works off various templates. Now I'm not going to have you, I'm not not going to be able to show you each and every piece in detail here, but hopefully you'll get the idea and have a look then in your own time. So say I wanted to create an Instagram post. So you can see here his Instagram post. And I click on that. So first thing is it will load up the size that I need in terms of Instagram. And the other thing here, it will provide me with a whole load of various templates. So what's just gone? Valentine's Day, isn't it? So if I click on Valentine's Day, so you can see it loads for me a whole range of templates here. So if I click on one of these templates and not being selective, then what I can do is I can edit this content. So I can edit the text, for instance. So I could change the color, you know, say my color was red. You know, I could change this guy here. I can add stuff in. Let me see, do I have a logo or something here? Just again, I'm just using pictures here. Say I wanted to add this again. Obviously, this isn't going to work, but you get the idea. So I wanted to add a picture in there, all of that type of stuff. Right. Even I'm on the paid for version. You can animate. Where is it? I won't let me animate this, but you get the idea. So typically, if I was working for a client, what I'd do is I would create templates for them here, and then I would populate those templates with their content, their imagery, their videos, their text, all of that type of stuff. So you can see. So again, this comes highly recommended. And again, you know, it doesn't pay to hire graphic designers to do each and every bit. So this will allow you to create, you know, pretty decent visual content for any of your digital channels, including your website, and to do so kind of effectively and cost effectively. So I'd recommend another one I'd recommend in terms of video. It's something you'll have to have a look at in your own time if you're new to video. It's called Quick, and it's only a mobile application. So it's QUIK. You download it onto your mobile phone, and then you populate it with content, so videos, imagery, and so on and so forth. And it will allow you to do pretty decent editing, production of those videos entirely for free. So you can add music, stuff like that. So again, I'd encourage you to have a look at that in your own time. But certainly if you're new to the visual side of things, there too, that I would recommend. They're both free to start off with, and certainly you'll be able to create strong visual content for your business time efficiently and cost efficiently. Website copy then. So again, the key point to remember in terms of text online is that readers online scan. They don't read in a linear fashion. In other words, they don't read online content in the way that they would a newspaper or a magazine. They don't start at the start and finish at the finish. They scan, right? So again, and you only really need to look in terms of your own user experience or how you consume text-based content to kind of realize this. So how to write website copy. So a couple of questions to ask yourself before you start. So what's your tone of voice? So in other words, how do you want to communicate? And an easy way to come up with your tone of voice or to start that is to pick 3 adjectives that you want to be known for. So you want to be friendly, professional, helpful, as a for instance. Right. So start there and then ensure that all of your communications reinforce that. Now, again, you can get templates in terms of tone of voice and stuff like that. But again, you know, just get started. So who are you looking to speak to? So again, that's your customer personas. And what terms or language or phraseology do you need to include? So i.e. your keyword research. So again, when it comes to the content, then what do you want to communicate? Headings. What's your heading or headline? So remember, your heading will be shown on Google. It will be shown your social. So it's a key point. So you want to spend time on your titles. Your subheadings. Which subheadings will you use? Can you use bullets or numbering? Because you want to allow people to scan. So you want to break up your content. So remember, readers scan online. They have a short attention span. So get to the nub of it quickly. When it comes to paragraph length online, shorter paragraphs work best. So 2 to 5 sentences. So the general rule of thumb there is after 3 sentences, we want to think about moving to a new paragraph. Where possible, use straightforward language and customer speak. Be customer centric. So again, you know, oftentimes we all have a professional speak, and in an effort to sound professional, we'll often use, you know, unnecessary big words, etc., etc. We don't want to do that. We want to communicate in a language that's accessible for our customers. Write, edit, edit. So can you communicate the same point with less words? Is every word necessary? So when I create a piece of content, and I'm not the best writer in the world, I go through it and I say, is every word necessary in terms of communicating that point? And if it's not necessary, I get rid of it. What's your unique value proposition or unique selling proposition? Again, that needs to be reinforced in terms of anything that you do. And what's your call to action? So how will you measure the effectiveness of the particular piece of content? So obviously, if it was content for a product, obviously you're going to measure it in terms of product sales, as a for instance, you know. Keep sentences clear and easy to understand. So this is what's called the gunning fog score. So you can go online and you can get tools that will score your content based on this, but these are kind of the highlights, right? So 8 to 10 word sentences are clear and easy to understand. 10 to 15 word sentences are slightly less clear and easy to understand. 15 to 25 word sentences can mean the fog is thickening, and 25 plus can mean the sentence is impenetrable. So you know, typically what you're trying to do there is you're trying to keep your sentences relatively short, again, to make what you're trying to communicate easier to understand or accessible. Payment gateways then. So in terms of, and these can make big differences in terms of the success of your online store or your e-commerce store. So again, as I mentioned earlier on, you want to ensure, right, that you're offering the payment gateways that your customers are familiar with or that they want. So in order to receive payments, you need to set up your payment processing with a payment provider. So a payment provider is a secure system that allows customers to buy from you using a payment method of choice. So I don't know if you're familiar with Stripe, started by the two Collison brothers from Limerick. So they would be very, very big, and they would manage a lot of Shopify payments, for instance. But there's a whole range of different payment gateways that you can use. PayPal obviously is another one that I mentioned. But I suppose the key point is, you know, to consult your customers to see their preferences in terms of how they like to pay, and they're the options that you need to offer by way of your website. You don't want the payment gateways to become an obstacle to the customer purchasing the product. Postage and shipping then. So again, this is just in terms of your strategies. Obviously, if you're selling online or selling internationally, and again, these are just some of the options that you can go with. So free shipping. So this is one of the most popular ways of attracting potential customers, is to offer free shipping. So the example here would be free shipping or free postage on orders over a certain amount, 100 euros, for instance. And that's a great way to entice people to spend a little bit more. Now, obviously, to be able to do that, you need more than one product. All right. Flat rate shipping. Your customers are charged one amount for shipping, regardless of the products or the quantities that they order. Weight-based or price-based shipping. So customers are charged a specific rate based on the value or weight of their cart. And carrier calculated shipping. So depending on who you're dealing with, customers are charged the exact cost of the shipping with your preferred carrier based on the weight of their cart. This is generally the most cost-effective and easier strategy to set up, and ensures no losses to you. So typically what you'll see is this on e-commerce websites, but I suppose what I'm saying is don't ignore certainly the top two, because oftentimes, you know, while there can be a cost to the business in terms of doing this, it can be a good strategy for growing your online sales. And growing. Again, general rule of thumb in terms of online, you know, it costs a lot more to acquire a new customer than it does to get repeat customers to buy again. So have a strategy for how you're going to get customers to become repeat customers, or, you know, add more items to their cart, etc., etc. Because in essence, when it comes to online, that's really where the profit is. Google Merchant Center, just a couple of things to make you guys aware of then before we finish up. So Google Merchant Center helps you to get your shop and product into Google and makes it available to shoppers across Google. This means that everything about your shops and products is available to customers when they search on a Google property. So again, recommendation there would be to go and set up a Google Merchant Center for your business. So if you want to create Google Smart Shopping campaigns from within Shopify or any of the other platforms, you need to connect to your Google Ads account as well. So these are Google Smart Shopping campaigns here. So with Smart Shopping campaigns, your existing product feed and assets are combined with Google's machine learning to show a variety of ads across the various network. So you'll have seen this in terms of shopping ads, etc., etc. Obviously, we don't have the time to go into it in detail today, but it's certainly something I wanted to draw your attention to. Retargeting on Facebook or indeed Instagram. So have you ever browsed the brand's website and then found yourself targeted by its ads every time you open Facebook or Instagram? That's called retargeting. It's one of the most effective forms of Facebook advertising. Now, again, if you consider the difference between, say, Facebook and Google, when people go to Google, typically they're looking for information, whereas when people go to Facebook, typically what they're doing is they're looking to socialize digitally. So it doesn't tend, Facebook isn't a great platform to market to people cold, right? It doesn't tend to work, whereas Google tends to be much better to market to people cold, because obviously they're proactively looking for that information at that given time. However, retargeting can work well on Facebook, and that's where you target people on Facebook who've already visited your website or already done something. So they might have watched one of your videos or something like that in relation to one of your products. So you can create retargeting audiences using the Facebook Customs Audience feature located in the audience section of your Facebook Business Manager. So you need to have a Facebook page for your business. If you're looking at Instagram as well, you need to have an Instagram business profile. If you're looking to serve your retargeting ads on both Facebook and Instagram, you need to have your Facebook business page and your Instagram business profile linked to one another. So custom audience allows you the option to tap into all of the data captured by your Facebook pixel and business pages. So in other words, if you go to your Facebook business page, you can get a piece of code there called a Facebook pixel. You install that Facebook pixel on your website, or you get your web developer to do that, and that then allows you to retarget on Facebook. So these are some of the things that you can do. So a customer file allows you to upload a list of email addresses, phone numbers, or any other contact information you've collected from customers or leads. So in other words, you could retarget the people who've already bought your product. In other words, customers, right? You could retarget the people who are signed up or subscribers of your email, for instance. Website traffic, create a retargeting list for reaching your website visitors. So common retargeting lists that generally convert well include those who have visited your website in the last 30 days or added something to the cart in the past 7. Engagement, a video collecting lots of views or an event that has a large number of attendees. Retargeting different groups of engagers is an effective way to bring prospects who may be interested in making a purchase to your website. So in other words, you have a particular product, you've created 4 or 5 videos for that particular product, and you retarget the people who have consumed those videos. Because obviously if they've watched those videos, they've demonstrated an interest in that particular product. Okay, that's me pretty much done for